My name is Jeff Trainer. I'm a solutions architect with Forum One, also Atlassian certified JIRA administrator, and I'm here to talk this morning about JIRA and Confluence, particularly Taming Godzilla. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this morning, it's that JIRA needs Confluence just like Godzilla needs Mothra, and I hope that that will make sense by the end of our time together. All right. A little bit of background. So we use, how many folks here use JIRA currently? All right, and Confluence? A little bit less. Okay. And then just by show of hands, any administrators in the room? All right. Okay. What I'm going to do here is I want to kind of go through some of the background of JIRA and Confluence, how we use it at Forum One in particular. So Forum One is a full-service digital agency. We do a lot of Drupal work. And we manage our development projects using JIRA and Confluence. Let me just get into a little bit of our backstory here to provide us with some context. So Godzilla is the king of the monsters, created by a nuclear incident. He became this monster, but also at times a complicated figure, a protector of the planet at times. Nuclear testing off the coast of the Pacific island country of Japan awakens a prehistoric animal, a dinosaur-like creature who comes and wreaks havoc on the Japanese civilization. Now, the original name of the Godzilla movie, the 1954, was Gojira. Simultaneously, not simultaneously, but elsewhere in the Pacific Ocean, 50 years later or so, in around the early 2000s, there was some software developers in another Pacific island country of Australia this time, using a software issue tracker called Bugzilla. Anybody use Bugzilla? Okay. So they're using Bugzilla and start working on their own code for their own issue tracker. They label the file where it's kept Gojira in homage to our king of the monsters, and it's also a bit of homage to Bugzilla, the issue tracker. Now, I'm here to say that maybe JIRA is the king of the issue tracker, but I want to talk about what issue tracking is and what happened, what incident changed JIRA. Issue tracking, as you know, originally kind of came about as a way to track defects in software. So you get to, JIRA is at its core ultimately a way for us to keep track of the things that we have to get done. You can have all sorts of issue types, bugs, stories, tasks, epics. These are, if you're familiar with Agile development approaches, we're starting to use some of the language there. But at the end of the day, these are just things that need to get done. You can assign them to people so that they're responsible for taking care of them. You can watch them so that as things get changed, you get notified. It provides you with a way to collaborate, commenting with your coworkers. And the nice thing about JIRA, keeps full track of history. So anything that gets changed on an issue, any kind of, if one of your colleagues goes and deletes all the good stuff that you wrote, it's all stored there. These issue trackers, as an issue tracker, we get to just kind of follow the things that get done. JIRA, it itself, compared to other issue trackers, I'd say is highly configurable. The forms that we are able to create as a JIRA administrator, you can customize your forms with a number of fields, default values for them, what options are available, the taxonomies in the form of labels, which we look at kind of a free tagging organization of issues versus components, which is kind of a fixed set classification. Very flexible permission system. One thing I'd say, I've worked with Drupal since about 2006, before I started getting into Atlassian consulting, I guess. And if you have any foundation in understanding how Drupal works, picking up JIRA is simple. You think about an issue type as a content type. You think about your search as a view. What do you want to display? What fields do you want to display? If you can understand the structure, the architecture of Drupal, JIRA is easy. Okay. And then JIRA is also known, of course, for its very flexible workflow editor. So I have this issue. What do I want to do with this issue as we work on it? And as you see, we have various statuses that can represent what's going on with the issue right now. We can move those issues through the various statuses. We can put conditions, so let's say only certain people can make this kind of transition, or this kind of transition can only be performed when we've got certain information or something accomplished. We can also do fun stuff like post functions, where we're going to do things when a transition happens. So when we transition this issue to closed, let's create a new issue automatically. Or we can even trigger some of our development operations tools. So again, highly configurable, highly complex, not too intimidating if you're willing to get under the hood and try to figure it out. I'm not going to get too much into the administration here, but I want to paint a picture of what the landscape is for JIRA. Now, as I mentioned before, there was an incident that created Godzilla, that woken this prehistoric monster. I'd argue that this incident in 2001, the release of the Agile Manifesto, about the same time that these folks in Australia are working on this issue tracker of their own, Gojira, this gets published. And kind of, this isn't the first time we've seen these ideas, but this is when ideas, really thinking starts to coalesce around lightweight development. So what is the Agile Manifesto? We're favoring individuals and interaction over processes and tools. There's a bit of irony here because I'm talking about a tool and how we're going to do that, but we'll get there. Working software over comprehensive documentation, favoring quick iterations and having stuff that we can use and test over planning out in a traditional waterfall approach what all of the requirements are going to be. Again, I'm going to be talking about documentation in a bit, but stick with me. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. That sounds like a great idea, except when you're the customer, perhaps. But this is, we want to work together as opposed to fighting over these details in a long waterfall contract. And then responding to change over having a plan. Again, as long as you're not the one paying for it, it sounds great, but it can also sound scary. So I want to look here. This Agile Manifesto, I would argue, this incident in 2001 blew up how we think about issue trackers as these folks were working on JIRA. So, JIRA Agile boards. This is kind of the differentiator. As Bugzilla itself is an issue tracker, it had configurable fields, it had configurable workflows and configurable issue types. But JIRA presented a different way of organizing or dealing with all of this content and all of these issues that we have within our system. One of my favorite Godzilla monsters here is Hedora. This came, whereas Godzilla was a response to nuclear threat, nuclear testing, Hedora was the smog monster, the pollution that was the threat to the people. And here we see Godzilla as a defender of the earth, coming and helping save us from this pollution, this monster. Agile boards, I would argue, are a way for us to deal with the pollution in our issue trackers, deal with the chaos and the amount of stuff that we have to deal with. We get a backlog. So both in Kanban and Scrum boards, we have this idea of a backlog. By default, normally you don't see that in a Kanban board, but it is, you can have that in there. This is your repository of all your issues, all the stuff that has to get done in the background. This is the collection of everything. And from this, we pull into our boards that we're going to work on. Now, two boards, everybody knows what Scrum and Kanban, the big difference is. Big difference being, so this is kind of a familiar, this is a Team Kanban board. The columns we're going to move through our various statuses. The main difference between Scrum and Kanban board, Scrum is going to use that Scrum approach that has time-boxed sprints that we're going to work on. We're going to select from our backlog a series of issues. These are the ones we're going to get done in this next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever your sprint length would be. And again, when we're favoring working software here over comprehensive documentation, we're going to build something in the next 2 or 3 weeks, whatever that sprint period is. Kanban, we're not focused on the time boxing. We're pulling from our backlog, and we're working on things kind of in a milestone-based approach. And I want to just kind of take note of that, because at Form 1, our development teams and our design teams kind of work differently. And so we needed to think about a way for us to work together within the same system, and how we can accomplish that using the combination of these boards here. One thing I want to note too, an interesting part of working with the Atlassian tools is that they provide a wildly inconsistent experience to everybody who uses them. We come to a conference like this, we talk about building Drupal websites. We have a pretty shared understanding of what a good website is, because we visit them all the time. We're seeing other organizations, we have aspirational websites we want ours to look like. It's out there, it's public. The Atlassian tools, JIRA and Confluence, kind of like your dirty laundry. Only the folks within your organization usually see it. Sometimes you have outside collaborators come in, but you can go to one organization, and the way that they use the software, totally different from another organization. And we're just working with the best knowledge that we have, but we have very different experiences, and so somebody might come in with some new ideas. We don't have the same, we're not afforded the same benefit of kind of this shared experience, being able to see everything. That creates a challenge for like understanding what is the bar for something that's good, or how is this working. Another one of my favorite monsters here, King Ghidorah. This was one of the arch enemies of Godzilla. Appeared in most movies. Godzilla was this prehistoric creature awoken from the sea. King Ghidorah was from another planet, hell-bent on destroying Earth. In some stories, he had tried to do so 5,000 years before. He's back, and he's here to destroy. Much larger than Godzilla, too. I would say this three-headed flying dragon is from space.
He's from Planet X.
Are the challenges that we face on any project. So the three-headed beast that we have to conquer here is our budget, our timeline, and our scope. And these are all changing things. As we get into a project, our timeline maybe is fixed, so is the budget available, the scope is being negotiated. Or perhaps the scope and budget are flexible, but our timeline cannot be negotiated. We need a tool to manage and fight against these three things. Remember I told you about Mothra? Mothra is what helps Godzilla here for us. So the king of the monsters who came and destroyed Earth. Mothra is from the Earth. Mothra was from a Pacific island. I don't know if you've seen any of the Mothra movies, but a couple of twins, humanoid twins, was Mothra's advocates. And Mothra would protect the Earth. Mothra fought Godzilla. Mothra, they pleaded, the Japanese government at times pleaded to have Mothra come and protect them from Godzilla. But when Mothra was at her best is when she teamed up with Godzilla to fight the three-headed monster of budget, timeline, and scope. So, thank you, by the way, for sticking with me with this metaphor. I am going to show you some real actionable stuff here in JIRA and Confluence in a moment. So, I want to talk about how these two work together. One of the most important things about Mothra, she gets killed in some of the movies, but she always leaves behind her larvae. And in future movies, Mothra is back in a new incarnation, in a new form. And I want to talk about how this creation helps us here. So we're going to create a Mechagodzilla, is what we're going to do. This is where we're going to get together. So I'm going to pop over here to JIRA. This is our Form 1 JIRA. This is our Godzilla project, and we're going to make our own Godzilla. Now, at Form 1, for example, we've got as a full-service agency, we have all folks with all sorts of different specializations. Not everybody is a developer. We've got digital strategists, we've got designers, we've got user experience experts. We need a place for them to collaborate. This is often looked at as the place where the developers spend all their time in JIRA. This is where you create the issues, get them to do that stuff. Don't bug me with it because it's kind of complicated. But Confluence, if you've ever used Confluence before, it's a wiki. It's a really easy to use wiki. Here's my Godzilla space. I can come in here and create a page. And I've got a really simple editor. Shortcut keys make it easy to defend the earth.
Is this your mother or any of them?
Mothra. Oh, thank you. Gosh, is that a 40? Mothra. So a really simple, anybody, you don't need to be a programmer, you don't need to have a real tech background, to get in here and start creating content. You can drag and drop images in there, any files that get attached. It has Lucene search in the back end, so all of those PDFs and Word documents are indexed within the search. Faceted search helps you find stuff. Super simple. This is stuff, again, if you've used a Drupal website, this is kind of like a Drupal wiki on steroids. A whole lot of good stuff that we like. But this is kind of like a site where all sorts of different folks from different kind of technical backgrounds can start collaborating together. It comes with, if you're familiar here, all sorts of these different templates. So I was just creating a blank page, but as you can see, we can have a decision log, we can create meeting notes, how-to articles, troubleshooting articles, and all those really are pre-formatted wiki pages. At the end of the day, every page in Confluence is just a wiki page. You create something with a template, you could tear all the template stuff out of there, it's still a wiki page, every page gets treated the same. The page that I want to focus on, the page template that I want to focus on in particular here, the one that we found the most value in our collaboration is the product requirements template. So if I come up here, pull from the list product requirement, again, as I was saying, this is just another page, but it's pre-formatted in a manner that allows me to kind of structure the way I'm putting our content in there. And this is where our team, during a discover and design phase, is going to start tracking their ideas, putting down all of the features that we want to build, all of the design considerations that we need. And it provides us with a manner. Okay, let me come out of here. And I've got one pre-made. So we're going to make Godzilla. We're going to make our own Mechagodzilla, let's say. We can start working together as a team to create those requirements for Godzilla. Makes sense here. I'm going to change this to Mechagodzilla. You see that there's kind of some stuff, some basic information that we want to capture about this product requirements template. We see this inside of this page properties macro that essentially allows us to collect that information in a structured way so we can create a list. And all of this information on a listing page, we can see what the name of the product requirement or epic that we're working on, who's responsible for it. Nice thing about JIRA and Confluence, wherever you are, you can always tag people. So I can come in here and I'm going to set my colleague John Johnson as the designer. As soon as I put his name in the page there and save it, he's going to get notified by email. He can also kind of follow any subsequent changes to this page. We come in here and our team works together on creating this page. You see I've started to build out a bunch of requirements for what we're going to need out of our Godzilla. And some design considerations as well that we're thinking about. And we also might have some open questions. So stuff that we need to answer. How does Godzilla fly? And I can, again, I'm going to tag my colleague, Andrew, so that he knows about this question, and we're going to start, kind of work together to come up with a decision about how Godzilla is going to fly out, what's going to be powering him. Save my page here. Those guys got notified. We can come back and work together. Like any other, what we see typically, we have the ability to comment on this page itself. So I can, again, using the same John's. You seen this? JJ. I'm sorry for spamming you with this stuff. But what was also nice is kind of like our Google Docs editing experience, or what you see in a Word document. I can come in here and I can also leave, inline comments. So I can, if I wanted to talk about something specifically within the page, I can come here and say, do we need him to? And save that. And now I've got the ability to, with my colleagues, kind of go back and forth within this one inline comment until we resolve that issue and come to an answer. In this case, we're going to come in here and we're going to say, not necessary. So, we're working towards this goal of defining our requirements. Again, the Agile manifesto does not favor comprehensive documentation, but we have in Confluence a form of documentation that's lightweight and flexible. Its design is utilitarian. It's meant to be changed and meant to be living throughout the process. And like revisions in Drupal, everything is stored and saved. So again, if JJ comes in and removes a whole bunch of the work that I did, it's no problem to go back there, revert back to the previous version or whatever that was. Once we get to the point here, that we're starting to kind of get our full requirements down, this is where things start to get fun, and Confluence and JIRA work together. We're going to create an epic. So part of our project here is to create all sorts of these monsters in the Godzilla universe. In this case, our epic is for Mechagodzilla. If you're Confluence users, remember that Command S or Control S will save your page, and if you're on any page, you just hit E, and you immediately get into the editor. Saves you a bunch of time. I want to create an epic for this Mechagodzilla, and what I'm going to do is just highlight this piece of text here, and if I hover over this, where my inline comment was, I've also got the ability to create a JIRA issue. So I'm going to do that. And in this case, I want to create an epic. I'm going to choose the Godzilla project there. Perfect. And I'll give my name. Just going to give it the same name. And I hit create. Page is going to reload, and what's happening now there in the background is that this epic has been created in my JIRA project. So if I navigate over to there, my JIRA issue, Mechagodzilla, this epic has been created. Very little information in there right now. I got the description, Robot Godzilla. And then there's this nice link back here. So this issue has been mentioned in this Confluence page. So if anybody comes across this issue, gets signed it, they can easily get back to where that documentation was from. Now, we've worked as a team to define kind of our goals, how this fits in, any kind of assumptions that we have, and now we want to create all of the stories related to our epic here for this. I'm going to do the exact same thing. Hover over this first requirement here, hit create issue. This time I want to create a story, again in that Godzilla project, and you'll notice I chose story. It saw that there's already an epic in this page, so it's going to link that story automatically to my Godzilla epic. What's even nicer is that it would be tedious for me to go through and do this for each one. At that point, I may as well just create them manually in JIRA, but I can go and create multiple issues from a table, select that, and it's going to allow me to map my columns to the description and use summary fields. So I'm going to say notes is the description, that's the user story, and again, I'm going to create. take a little second here, working in the background, but is now creating issues within, well, oh, live demos is right. Let me try that one more time. Cross your fingers for me. Story, multiple issues from the table, notes, and create. What happens when we auto-create all of these issues? All right, we did it. 12 new issues have been created, and we see the links to those issues have been embedded into the page where that story is. And you'll notice that the status right now of this issue is reflected there in the page. Now, let's pop over to this issue. I can jump over to my issue from my Confluence page, and let's look at the workflow that we have for our development stories. This is the stuff that our development team is going to work on. We've got a Scrum-based approach to our development team, so we have issues that are in the backlog that need a grooming estimate at this point. Our team is going to go add an estimate to that, what they think the level of effort is going to be and a relative sizing, and we move into a not yet started state. From there, we can pull these development issues into our 2-week sprints and plan our sprints out, right? And we move through the various steps. And these are the steps that we use at Form 1. These workflows are highly configurable, and we can adjust them to whatever your team, however your folks work. But we move through these, so stories are in progress, the tech lead review, the PM or QA review, the product owner review, until it's ready for production and ultimately deployed. At any point, I can move it into a needs input status. If I need to get help from a colleague, we can reject it from its testing states and go back into in progress until it's complete. We have a very developer-focused workflow for these stories that we're moving on. Not everybody in the company works that way. Our design team in particular, our design creative team, don't often work in the same 2-week sprint cycles. They're sometimes working on multiple projects. Sometimes they have, most of our design and creative team have milestone-based deliverables. So we're preparing a set of comps, we're preparing a set of wireframes, and they're due on this date. It's not the same 2-week iteration. So forcing them into the same way of working is a challenge. So what we did, I'm going to get out of here, is we created another issue type. We've got our story, our normal development story, but then we also have a creative UX story. So let's say there's some new design features that we need for our Godzilla. There's a handful of extra powers that we want to add. In this case, we have loose requirements for them. We kind of have ideas, but we need the design team to go out and build out what the specifications for these powers are going to be. I'm going to do the same thing. This time, I'm going to switch over to my custom issue type of creative UX story. I'm still going to link them to our Godzilla epic. And I'm going to create multiple issues from the table, map into the notes, and hit create. So from the same page now, we're going to start working on this design challenge of adding these new features here. JIRA Cloud's coming through for me. We create our issues in bulk. If I scroll down, here we got all of these new creative UX issues. If I pop over it again back to my project, and now I look at my backlog. So our development team, as I mentioned, is working on these 2-week sprints. Here are all the things that I've got in my backlog right now. A bunch of stuff that we can start developing on. I've also got some design stuff that we need to start creating. That's not going to happen with our typical 2-week development sprints. So I'm just going to go, I know the development team can get started on some core features. So we're going to create our first sprint. Sprint number 1, and I'm going to grab some features here from our backlog. We'll do origin, posture, scars. I can select multiple We're not going to do atomic breath because we're still kind of working on the weapons that he has. Yeah.
Those are the ones that were created first time. So they're not.
Oh, they did get created.
Yeah, they're not like JIRA and Confluence.
Thank you. So let me, I want to make sure that I'm getting the right ones here. And I've got issue links here. So I'm going to go grab a bunch of my stories, and these are the ones that I'm going to work on in our first sprint. These are the ones that the development team is going to work on. And they can go ahead and start their sprint. We'll give it 2 weeks and go. Now we've got this sprint board. Here's for our active sprint. We can configure single columns for each of our statuses, or we can have all of our statuses mapped to these. We have multiple statuses mapped to these columns. If you've used these boards before, I can just come in here, and I've got the ability to modify all of my columns, so I can make a ready for development column, and I'm going to map a status over to that not yet started. Now, when I go back to my board, extra column in there, I can start work. After I've given my estimate, I can start pulling stuff into my column. Now, again, our development team is working on these 2-week sprints. Our creative team wants to get started, and they've got a milestone coming up presenting their designs in 3 weeks, let's say. Where, as I showed you before, the workflow for our stories is very developer focused, but if we look here at the workflow for our creative stories, we've got a much more simple workflow. Issues come into an open state, they're ready to be worked on. We can assign them to somebody and start progress on them, and then from there we can immediately close them, or we can send them to an input needed if we want to get somebody else to look at that issue, or send it to a needs review. And some of these things we want to review them before we say that we're done or present them to any of our clients. That workflow is different, obviously, from the development one, and we want to give our creative folks a place within the same project that they can be working alongside without kind of the confusion of having to deal with how the development team works. So, whereas I had a Scrum board here for our development team, what I'm going to do is create a Kanban board within the same project that our creative team can work on alongside. So I'm going to select Create Board and create a Kanban board. If I chose more from an existing project, it's going to take all of the issues in that project and put it on that Kanban board. I want to give the design folks a single place where they can focus. So I'm going to save it, do one on an existing saved filter, and hit Next. I was prepared for this presentation, so I went and created a filter ahead of time. And you see here my query, my JQL query, if you wanted to do your advanced searching, is the project equals Godzilla. The issue type is creative UX story. We're going to order that by rank ascending. There you see there, those are the issues that I come up with. If you've never used the JIRA searching, the issue search, super powerful. I'm doing it through the advanced mode. You just go over to basic, and you've got your kind of editor there for defining all of your search terms. And you can save these searches. So any search that you create, you can save that. In this case, I've saved it as my Godzilla design board. So I'm going to call this Godzilla design and find the filter that I created, Godzilla design board, and create the board. So now I have this dedicated board, and I want to add a column here for input or review. And I can take my needs review status and my input needed status and throw them there and go back to my board. So while the development team is working on their 2-week sprint, knocking off stories, getting things done, the creative team can come in here and start working in a Kanban fashion towards completing their stories on whatever milestone-based timeline that they're using. We can pull these things into need review or input needed status if I need to get somebody's input on it. Let me assign this to JJ as I do that. We can start to get things done in this non-iterative, milestone-based approach using the Kanban board. What's nice is that your project manager or account manager, whoever's overseeing the thing, they still need to know the sum and total of what's going on. They can come and look still. Let's go back to our backlog for our Scrum board. And we see we've got Godzilla Sprint 1 going on, stories, and even though in our Kanban board we're only seeing the design stories so that team can focus on that, we are seeing all of the stories in one place in our backlog. As I go through here, we've got 5 stories in here, and if we look, at our Kanban board, we've got 6 in total. As I finished one here, so as I finished precognition, or as I finish fireballs, done, those stories start to disappear from our backlog. So we still have a single place where everything's going on, but we're giving our teams, our folks, custom ways or places to collaborate with each other in a manner that reflects the way they work. The Scrum team, the development teams can still use Scrum. Kanban teams can still use this milestone-based Kanban approach. All right, we can go back to our active sprints here. I'm not going to move all of our issues through, but does that make sense that how we can have multiple Agile boards within the same project? Wonderful. So, what I'd like to close on, again, by having the ability to create these items from Confluence, the most powerful thing in our minds is being able to look here back to where we began. So every issue that we worked on is linked back to those product requirements where we have the team that has the ability to collaborate, and we can continue to iterate and improve and add to those requirements. So we could be 6 sprints into a project, somebody comes up with a new feature, a new design, we can start to document that here, collaborate from that here, and have that traceability from idea inception through development and deployment. We were able to trace all of that and kind of manage and collaborate together. What I would encourage you all to do, if you have folks within your organization who are using JIRA and Confluence, these kind of configurations are quite simple. You don't have to be a JIRA administrator to manage a board. You can get that permission. You don't have to be, everybody within Confluence typically has the same kind of permissions to create, modify, and those page templates, if I look here, talk to your administrator about the templates themselves. As you see, our global templates, we were looking at the product requirements template. It's modifying these things is as simple as modifying a page within Confluence. So I come in here, this is our product requirements thing. I could say that the importance column is not important for us, but I want to change that to the date. Saving that, now all future product requirements that I create are going to have that new date column in there. So you can start to structure the way that your teams are interacting with each other. And for folks on your team who are scared of using JIRA, who find it intimidating or too complicated, remind them that there's Minizilla, and everybody's got to start somewhere and learn. Within JIRA, we've got JIRA software, which we were just looking at, which is our typical software development Scrum approach. But at its core, JIRA Business provides simple Kanban boards for teams to work with. At Forum 1, our marketing department manages our events and planning and email campaigns using JIRA and Confluence. Our business development team manages opportunities that come in the work that needs to be done to prepare proposals using JIRA and Confluence, in addition to, as we've looked at, our creative teams and our development teams. So JIRA can be used throughout the organization, and if anything, I would say, if we look at the way we're able to tie our issues back to our collaboration and documentation, using JIRA throughout your organization gives you the tools you need to collaborate better, to get the full input from across your organization. I got about 5 minutes left, so I want to close it from there. I want to let you know that Forum 1, in addition to Drupal, to website and application development, we also provide JIRA and Atlassian consulting services. Happy to talk to anybody about ways that you can improve how you're using it internally. We want to open up the floor right now if there are any questions, thoughts, feedback. Yes?
How do you get your design creative team to use some Confluence to document all the wireframes and all the evolving designs? Do they do that?
So
It's totally visible to everyone?
that is, I won't lie, it wasn't easy, and it's still a work in progress. But because there's, I think, I don't want to. The design team can be very particular about design, and there was a little bit of pushback towards using the tools because JIRA is a very utilitarian tool, kind of puts you into a certain mode of working.
Not even on JIRA, just on Confluence.
Confluence.
If other people, clients and
Yep.
management can see designs as they evolve, see requirements related to design. Not to mention having developers later on store all their formal documentation.
Yeah. So by creating the Confluence page as the site of the requirements, we create a space where we're really asking, inviting those folks to participate and collaborate. The nice thing, again, it takes some convincing, but one of the nice things about JIRA's file system is that if I create a mock-up, and then create a revision of that same mock-up and upload it to the same page, you've got full file history, so you can go back at any point. Really takes some convincing and training, but by encouraging the design team, getting them in there, we are kind of creating that site of collaboration for everybody. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just really was already slowing me down like there's a little drive to go out crazy. Share documentation in your system.
It's a little bit of extra work, but it's a lot more visibility across the team, and it's a lot more visibility for new folks who come in on the project, to be able to have that in one place. What we had before and kind of still struggle with is stuff just lost in Google Drive folders that aren't shared with the right people. So somebody comes on by, again, having this open collaboration space, inviting more voices.
And people are working in email rather than in your Confluence space.
But we'd rather have them working in Confluence. Yeah. So the things aren't getting lost in inboxes. Any other questions? Yes.
In our organization, we have two separate spaces. So the development group has one space, the administrative group has a second space. How easy is it to share the information between those two areas?
So by default, pretty easy. By default, Confluence is wide open in terms of permissions. You have to lay restrictions on top in order to keep people out. So by default, people can move between spaces. For example, we create a space for every project that we're working on. So we have folks moving between, as we move between projects, everyone has their own space. You have the ability within Confluence to come up there and move content between spaces. I can make a copy of a piece of content and move it into another space. A lot of folks find the plugins available in the Atlassian marketplace. Something like Copy Page Tree, for example, gives you the ability to take a whole set of pages, copy them, put them into another space. A really easy way to kick off, the creation of a new space with a bunch of templated pages. So unless you're putting restrictions on your spaces or pages, people should have the ability to kind of move freely between them. And yeah, that answer your question? Yes.
Have you seen Shin Godzilla yet?
Sorry?
Shin Godzilla?
I have no. Please do tell.
It just came out like a year ago.
Okay. I learned a lot about Godzilla in preparing for this presentation. I'm not the ultimate knowledge source, but I've learned a lot more. All right. Well, if there are any other questions, thank you very much for your time and attention. Feel free to talk to me if you have any other thoughts or questions. Happy to discuss. Enjoy the rest of the day.